welcome to this video on classes. My name is Alexander Corsi. I will be your presentation and your voice in your head basically at the moment. As you can clearly see, we're here on the basic classes that are in the game. This is a list of classes that you can pick currently within the game that is working for 1.5.0. That is the Warrior, Archer, Mage, Rogue, Paladin, and Shield Bearer. First, we move on to the Warrior. Now, the Warrior itself, as you can see here, it talks about the Warrior skills. As you can guess, the Warrior is a more melee-focused unit. And if you look at its skills, ignoring the image there, you will only really see the left side. This image here, you won't see that, whereas you'll just get a card like this. But as you can look here, it's a very oriented here towards melee, as it is. Mighty Dash is a move to location skill, and you can also see that it requires a dice roll. Now, of course, some people would be like, "Oh no, then if I just roll a 1, it's useless to me." But then, of course, that can be controversial. Now he says the resulting number of dice determine X number of meters that can be traversed. This doesn't include the amount that you move yourself, meaning that if you don't use this, then you just move an extra amount, basically. But, as again, you can take a look at the effects get stronger and stronger. This increases the amount of dice amount by 1 if this rank is achieved. And then change the dice from a D6 to a D12. So you add, basically, so you go from 1d6 to 2d12s, basically. Now, this also includes onto the other cards. For instance, Whirlwind Slash, and as you notice, this costs 1 AC. That's Arcane Slot. Now, as we continue going through, you can notice that some dice, they get a little bit bigger. For instance, this one has a cooldown of 2 turns. This one doesn't. It requires 1 AC slot. And as you notice here, it has 3d6, 3d20s. What does that mean? Well, let's move on to this. You can use magic to fire a flurry of slashes that can travel to an enemy. The first iris roll determines the number of landed attacks, meaning you need to roll the 3d6s, and for every 6 that lands on a 4 or higher, which is the general term for every single card that has a default, it's the default roll. So basically you need a 4 or higher. Basically it means that any of those land, you do damage then. 1d3 for damage of each hit dice. Now, as you go along, you can see that this just changes. So, let's say we go to this one. The dice rolls are increased by 1, and the damage is now d6 for each successful hit. So it goes from a d3 to a d6. And now, if we go down here, the dice rolls are increased by 2. And the damage is now 2d6 for each hit. And then we go into Willpower. This is a will check one. It doesn't cost any AC, as you've noticed already, probably. So, it's a passive skill. Okay. I'll stop there for a moment, and I'll re-say what I was saying. As you can see, this skill in Power has a few things different from the previous ones. The first thing you'll notice as you read the name here, passive skill. This is a skill you don't activate. Unlike the other ones, these are a skill that doesn't activate directly from your control. It activates either on a condition, or it activates when you have a certain amount of resources available. And you can see it also has a cooldown and a different dice roll comparison to the others, where they had an actual dice there. This says will check. What does that mean? Will check is willpower checks, your saving throws. So you need to pass this check to activate this card. So, and the card says, when your health reaches 25%, the ability will activate, giving an attack and defense boost temporarily. Upon activation, roll a willpower check. If successful, 50% of your attack goes up. You get +1 to your dodge. And then if number is a critical, the effects are doubled. And now, when you go on to the next one, you notice that the amounts are increasing. So, for instance, rank 2's effect, it now activates on a 50% less 50% or less health. The willpower roll is still the same, but the damage increased, but the dodge increased by 1, and of course the effect is doubled if it was a critical. And now the third rank now activates on a 75% or less of your maximum health. Oh, sorry, or when your health just reaches that. And your attack now goes up by another 25%, and your dodge rolls get a +3. Now you may be wondering, why is it broken down into 3 different ranks? This is due to the fact that each class starts off with a basic skill, and then you can upgrade that skill via basically just getting more experience points, and these experience points can be attained by killing monsters, or obtaining and completing side quests, or interacting with entities. Basically, however you achieved it, you can increase the power of each skill and every skill in the game by a certain amount. So it can only go from rank 1, which is the base one, which you get, and then rank 3, which is the maximum. Now, Ability Surge, which just like the previous one, is a passive skill, and it activates once per battle. Now you may be wondering, doesn't this sound like a D&D game? Game's Ability Surge? No, it's different. The reason being is because in that one you just get an extra action, and that's it. And this one, it's a passive. Now, how it activates is on the condition of if you have run out of action points, this will be available to you. Then you can activate it, and that means you can activate it once per turn. Once you have activated it, you roll 1d3, and then the resulting numbers from the thrown dice becomes either your more actions or another set of movements. For instance, if I roll 1d3, if I get a 6, that means I get 3 points. That means it could be either 2 actions and 1 movement, or 2 movement and 1 action. Meaning, whatever my movement is, so if I have 6 movement, I move that amount, then that gets refunded, and I get a second movement, so I can move another 6, and that gets used, and I still have an action left over. Now, in rank 2, this now goes from a D3 to a D4. And in rank 3, that goes from a D4 to a D6. This gets very powerful after a while, because it means you could just have either 6 actions or 6 movements, or 3 and 3. And it gets to the point where that's why these are broken down into ranks. This is the perfect example of that. They get stronger so fast. But because of the amount of time it takes to learn one from rank 1 to rank 2, then from rank 2 to rank 3 is the same amount of time, the XP amount that I've written in the GDD patch history is the reason why it's that high. 1,000 to buy a skill, 2,500 to rank it up to rank 2, and then 5,000 to rank it up to rank 3. And these are only the warrior skills. They get stronger in the higher tier versions of the class. Now, for instance, like the archer. The archer is more magical focused, so most of their skills will have like a magic cost. So, for instance, multi-shot. You can use up to 3 arrows to damage multiple enemies or a single target. You roll 3 dice. For each successful hit, apply a D3 crit to an attack. D3 crit means you roll 1d3 for each attack. On the highest rolls, so basically, on the roll it does, so like basically 1 arrow does 5, 1 arrow does 4, 1 arrow does 2. 5 would mean that you do 3. A 4 would do a 2, and a 2 would do a 1. Now, what does that do? Because you may be wondering, oh, that's a little bit too low damage. Sorry. You may be wondering, why is that so low damage? That's not determining the amount of damage it hits. That's determining the amount of a certain weapon's damage hits. So, for instance, if I rolled 1 arrow, is a D3. I roll that 1, then So basically, this is how it works. If I roll the d3 and if two of the arrows miss, but one arrow hits and it gets the maximum, that means whatever the arrow, oh, sorry, not arrow, whatever the bow or ranged weapon I'm using that uses multi-shot, increases all of the damage to maximum and applies it as if it was separate attacks. So, for instance, I roll a multi-shot, I get one arrow. It's the maximum. Now my long crossbow does 6 damage plus whatever my brawn is. That means I don't have to roll the d6. That means it's just the maximum amount. So that means I can do 6 plus, maybe for instance my dex is 2. My dexterity for the roll is a plus 2. So it's now an 8. That means 8 plus 8 plus 8. That means I'm doing 24 damage with one arrow. And that could also mean if the other arrows had landed and done the maximum amount, I would have done 60 damage. 72 damage out the gate. And that is only with rank 1. With rank 2, that's 4 arrows. With rank 3, it's 6 arrows with a d6 this time. It's very powerful of a skill. However, as you can see, the cost is like, well, that's way too cheap, and the cooldown is not even that long. The cost is meant to be 10 AC meant to be 2 AC per arrow. So if you use 3 arrows, then 3 AC. If you use 6 arrows, 6 AC. Oh, sorry. 3 arrows is 6 AC, 6 arrows is 12 AC. You see what I mean? Arcane slots don't come in large quantities in this game. So your spells use up arcane slots, your skills may use up arcane slots. You need to be very careful how you use these because you can only get them back after a certain amount of time. Now, another one, like explosive shot, you shoot it and it deals a certain amount of damage towards an enemy. The damage is determined by 2 rolls, a d6 and a d20. On a d6 crit and a d20 crit, you do the maximum range of an explosion and the maximum range or the maximum damage within that explosion, and it falls off every 2 tiles by 2 points, so it doesn't fully kill off people who are so far away. But this increases by rank 3, which is you roll 1d6 and then you roll 2 d20s for the damage, which can be a maximum of 40. And then of course you roll 1d10 to indicate the range of the explosion. If the first dice roll is a critical, the hits, both the orange and red dice is doubled, meaning your orange die, which is your damage one, and your red die, which is your range one, doubles. So whatever you roll for those, increase it by just double that number. Now, we go into the passive skills of the archer. The passive skills of the archer mainly focus on trying to make your hits more effective. For instance, Eagle Eye. You can target body parts to discern enemies from environment and increasing your perception and detection checks by 1. You're also immune to visual impairment status effects. And this increases each time for your detection and stealth, or perception and your detection for stealth, by like double each rank. But the best one is this one right here, Disabling Shot. It's a shot that basically upon a critical hit on any of your attacks, you roll 1d20. Upon a 12, the target is disabled, meaning they cannot move half their range, they cannot use any skills, and they cannot use any attacks. And their evasion is reduced to 0, basically. And this does decrease each time you get a rank up. So this means that it's a lot easier to get the hits. It is a lot easier to actually land that attack. Now, we go into the rogues. The rogue focuses on stealth and just straight up stabbing you in the back. Literally. Not metaphorically, just literally. So, for instance, you have a spell called Cloak here, which is one my player's favorite for some reason. which is basically you roll a d6. On a successful roll, you become invisible. Each turn you're invisible, the enemy rolls a perception check. You roll your d6 if your enemy succeeds a check within 3 meters of you, which is 3 tiles away from you. If your dice score is equal to or higher than the enemy, you succeed. If it's lower, then you fail the check and you are revealed. And with each rank increases this further. So you increase the difficulty of being detected by 1 to all perception checks within 3 meters of you. And then you increase that difficulty again by 2. And then you reduce the die of the enemy to a d4. Now, why is that important? Why would you reduce the die? Why is that effective? Well, you roll a d6. They roll d6s as well, basically. So they get reduced to a d4. Now, whatever their perception is added onto that d4. So, say for instance, they have a perception of 8, and you have a stealth of 6, meaning you add those numbers onto your rolls. So my d6 at maximum will be a 12. At their d6 at a maximum would be a 14, meaning I would not be able to land that. But because of rank 3, it reduces it down to a 4, meaning it's a 12, and reduces it further by 2, meaning it's down to 10, meaning I should easily crunch that as long as I get a maximum roll. That's the point. This skill reduces the chance of you getting detected each rank and increases your time of being invisible by that amount. Now we move on to Cloud Walk. Cloud Walk is essentially you add on to your movement. Unlike Mighty Dash, which was the warriors, this one you do count towards your movement. It's not adding something else onto it before you move. It's now you move extra amounts. You move X amount more, basically, and each die, or the die basically increases each time. Now, another one that is a passive and is another player preferred is Backstab, which is when you attack an enemy from behind, you do 3/6 damage, causes daze and bleed for 3 turns. Now, 3d6 damage means that you just roll 3d6s, and what the result is, that's the amount of damage you do. Rank 2, you do 6d6, so you roll 6 dice. But for rank 3, you do 2d20s, and the bleed effect goes up by 5. Bleed and daze goes up by 2 turns. A lot of players like to use Cloak and Backstab at the same time to try and get around enemies, because it costs nothing to do a Backstab, and it only activates when you attack an enemy from behind. It doesn't matter what weapon you use as long as you hit them from the back. It's quite powerful. But the most powerful players have said is Ghost Mode. Ghost Mode is activated when a player uses Cloak, so you need to get Cloak. If they get a critical success on their roll, they enter Ghost Mode. All perception checks are automatically failed against you, and you have ethereal damage. Ethereal damage is essentially an attack where if you crit with ethereal damage, you don't do normal critical damage, you do mortal wounding. Mortal wounding is fatal damage, meaning if an enemy takes it, there's a high likelihood they'll die their very next turn, because they've taken so much damage to the point their very soul has been shattered. Their bodies may be left preserved perfectly, but there's nothing left of their soul. It's just basically dust. And as you can clearly see here, perception checks are automatically failed against you and do ethereal damage. But the best part, when you're in Ghost Mode, attacks do not take you out of Stealth Mode, and this lasts for 2 turns. Basically, you can get behind someone, do a Backstab, which would just basically outright kill anybody, and that'll be it. And then the best part is, rank 2, this is the effect of it. This is why people love it. When an enemy is felled while in Ghost Mode, so if you have Backstab and Ghost Mode, you basically kill someone outright, the duration of the skill increases by 1. So now you last for 3 turns. You get to another person, 3 turns. Another person, 3 turns. It chains. And that's what players love. They love the chaining effect of this skill, because they can synchronize classes within those classes. They can synchronize skills within the class and make a perfect chain of kills. And this is what draws most players in. They love to synchronize and make builds around in games around this crazy phenomenon of synergies that even I don't think of when I'm making these cards. I just simply make a card within a skill set, and then say, right, all these four cards or these cards need to work together. And then if a card set outside of that from another class works with it, then these players just see that and then just merge it together. And then, as you can clearly see, for the third rank, you gain advantage, which means you roll 2 dice. The highest value goes out. And then you can make a train, and then you can basically make another attack on an enemy within 3 meters of you. This skill is heavily broken because of the fact that you can basically do a lot of attacks in a single turn, and no one will be able to do anything about it. This is why the rogue has been considered the most powerful class, or one of the most powerful classes in the test builds, because people can just build a skill around basically being invisible and getting free kills. Now, we move on to the mage, who just uses magic. But their magic is a little different. For most mages, they don't have skills. They just have spells. And some skills could be like recovering your mana or increasing your damage. In this game, you have dedicated skills. And they do cost actual mana. Or arcane slots, which is basically your equivalent to spell slots from an off-brand game. G&D. And this skill, for instance, active skill, it's a 3 turn cooldown, but it's a magical shield. Place a transparent shield in front of you. The shield has 20 temporary hit points. Rank 2, it gains another 20 hit points and an armor class, which means that now damage is reduced when it takes hits. And then you can spend an extra 3 arcane swords to increase the armor range by 10. You will also roll 1d20, double the result, and add it to its hit points. So if you get 20, add 40 onto that. And it's now 80. 80 health points. That is insane skill that no one is taking it because it's slept on. Another version is... Oh, I passed one, sorry. Another one is Magical Strike. You can fire a maximum of 3 mana strikes at once. Each strike requires 1d6 to be rolled. Upon success, the attack hits. The success roll is a 4-up default roll. Each successful dice roll or dice result must be resolved by a d12 now. The result is for the damage. The number of this dice is doubled if the d6 roll was a critical success, so a 6 basically. Each mana strike costs 1 arcane slot per use. So if you use 3 mana strikes, then you need to use up 3 arcane slots. Now for rank 2, as you can see, the number of strikes is increased by 1, and the number of arcane slots needed is reduced to 2 slots per strike. Meaning now you just need 3 for the. Now you just need like 4. No, sorry, you need just 2 basically for just rank 2. And then rank 3, the damage roll or die is increased to d20s. On a critical success, the damage roll adds mortal wounding to characteristic to the attack, meaning you're now doing fatal damage with each hit. And fatal damage is something like in a 2 hits from a fatal attack, you will die. There's nothing that saves you. Death saves can't save you. Death throws will be automatically failed upon taking even more damage overall, and as such becomes a problem for anyone who faces against a mage. But the 2 broken games I've 2 times I've seen people pick mage. They don't pick these 2. They pick these 2 and they pick the passive skills and somehow make them more broken. For example, Mana Aura. Magic Aura. It creates a magic field around yourself. This will reduce magic damage by 10%. You can increase the density by rank 2, and this reduces it by an additional 10, and your magic attacks go up by 33. And then you can use rank 3 to basically give the effect of rank 1 and 2 to your entire party, but this will cost an extra 3 arcane slots. And then I've seen people where they use Mana Perception to just basically say outright what's the target's weakness. And it allows you to perceive the weaknesses of the target entity, increasing damage to the target entity by 10 for 2 turns. You can increase this, by the way, to 40% for a total of 4 turns. Using these two, they just sit in the back, spot an enemy, weaken them, and then buff their entire team with these skills. And if they truly were taking an offensive role as well, they most of the time take Magical Strike rather than Magical Shield. Now, another thing is that Paladins in the game follow a similar form to a game called G&D, which is they have their own version of their strikes, which is Divine Strike. They envelop their weapon with magic, and it turns it into an extra dice roll. Each of rank will give an extra effect to this. Now, the reason why this is important is because damage in this game is varied. There is normal damage, which is down to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning. Then there's the different types of magical effects. For instance, you can have fire, ice, water, earth, wind, and then there's the types like holy magic. These are heavily effective against demons and chaos-oriented entities. For instance, the werewolf was a chaos-oriented entity. If you've seen the werewolf previously, that creature will absorb enough damage to it would be basically completely hit with critical hits. So it's always a maximum roll. And then skills like the Phalanx increase your survivability. So not only will you be damaging a lot of people, but you'll also be surviving a lot longer. Because this increases it by, if you go by to rank 3, by a total of 45%. And it lasts for 5 turns, which is longer than even the cooldown. But as you can see, per rank, the arcane salts increase. So it would cost you 6 arcane salts to use the 3rd rank effect. So when you rank it up to rank 3, you now need to start using 6 arcane salts each time you activate the skill. Now, the last two skills of the Paladin is Last Stand and Impenetrable Fortress. Last Stand basically makes it so that while you basically can't move from your spot, you're not gonna die so easily, and you're not gonna like let the enemy slide with a hit. So you're just gonna hit them back even harder. For instance, when your health is 20% lower, 20% or lower, you gain the following stats. Your accuracy goes up, your speed goes down, and your agility goes down, meaning you can't dodge as quickly for 1 turn. Then you move on to the next one, which is basically your stats will increase up to 100% AC, 75% speed reduction, and 2 AG goes down. But you now activate this on a 30% or lower of your maximum health. And the rank 3 does the same, it increases it slightly, but it gives you +3 willpower, meaning you can actually resist status effects by that point. You might be able to resist the status effects. And also Brawn to increase your damage, if you've noticed over here. Now, the last one, Impenetrable Fortress, is a tanker's dream. Because, if you read it, you require a vigilance check. Vigilance check is basically making sure you're oh god, what was it? Reading this now. You are psychically protected. Vigilance stops you from being distracted, it stops you from losing your way, and it stops you from being charmed, essentially. Because you're on guard, you're mentally fortified now. Now, when you take a mortal damage hit, remember this is mortal damage, so fatal. You roll 1 vigilance check. On a success, you take half the damage. Now, if you get up to rank 2, now this happens on criticals. Now, if you go to rank 3, you now have advantage to this roll, meaning now on every critical hit against you, you now can roll this. Oh, sorry, no. Now you automatically roll 1 vigilance check, and for every success, you half the damage. and you pretty much will be halving the damage each time. So if something does 10 damage, you do 5. If something does 3 damage, it does like 1. Oh, sorry, it does 1. That is essentially the Paladin. They are tankers, but at the same time, they are also heavy damage dealers against occult enemies. Now, Shield Bearers are a unique class. They are entirely designed around the fact that they don't use weapons outside of shields. So their skills reflect this. For instance, Shields Up. The user will get a shield around them. This converts arcane slots into hit points. Upon being broken, then take 1 stagger. For each arcane slot, gains 5 temporary hit points. So if you were to have like 30 arcane slots, that means you have 150 temporary hit points if you use them all up at once. Now, for every arcane slot gain, 10 temporary hit points for every 2 hit points. Sorry. For every arcane slot, gain 10 temporary hit points. Means that now you're now doubling that number. So instead of it being 150, it could be 300. And for every 2 hit points, gain 1 fortified. Fortified is essentially reduce the damage by 2%. You reduce the damage by 2%. And if you got 300, divide 300 by 2, which would equal, give me one moment, a total of 300. So if you were to take a total of 300, divide that by 2, get 150 points of fortified. Meaning, and again, remember, 150, that's 300 points of damage resistance there. So all you need is a lot of those arcane slots to wield that. Now, again, you can also see it there at the bottom. Arcane slots gain 20 hit points, and for every 2 hit points, gain 2 fortified. That is ridiculous. Now, that's one of the strongest skills, but this is the strongest skills, I believe, of them. Now, how this works is that that your shield bearer takes damage, absorbs it into a weapon, item, or in their own magical source, and then just dishes it back out immediately. So you convert your lost shield's HP into damage for an extra attack at no action cost, and then at higher ranks, this is increased by certain amounts. For instance, you can see in rank 2 it's increased by 66%, but at rank 3 this is increased by 34% and an additional 34%, meaning this goes up to 100%. And then you have stuff like overshields, which is basically a shield above your normal shields up. So when your shield is about to break, you can use your reaction to activate the skill. Convert 5 of your remaining arc slots into 20 temporary hit points. Then you can decrease the cost by 2 and increase the amount by 5. Increase the amount of hit points by 5. Or you could, at rank 3, expend all remaining arcane slots to gain a trait Perfect Shield. You become impervious to magical and physical damage status effects for 2 turns. For 2 turns, you can't take magical damage, can't take physical damage, and you're impervious to status effects. Now, the next group is for advanced classes, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. That's in another video. I will be talking only about these ones. Now, as you just saw, the classes sound pretty crazy. As you can read here, this is what they can do. The characteristic mains for Warrior, Brawn and Constitution. What does that mean? It means that they prioritize Brawn and Constitution when it comes to skill points. Same for the proficiency mains. These classes is mainly focused on fighting. This one focuses on heavy fighting. Now, it's a melee specialist, so that means that he's very exceptionally capable at fighting in melee. You can also see he works with simple and martial weapons as well as shields. But for something like the archer, he only works with simple and ranged weapons. But as you can see, he's got a lot more proficiency mains, as well as his characteristic mains, Dex and Wisdom, mean that he is more experienced and he is flexible, and he's also really good at ranged attacks. And as you can clearly see at the bottom, he can use magic up to tier 4, which is a high level of tier magic. The Rogue just basically doubles his Dex. He's really good at basically being sneaky, and he only uses simple weapons, but you can make your character use martial weapons, so you don't have to worry about that. And he can only use up to tier 3, which is lower than the Archer, but higher than the Warrior. But then you move up to the Mage, who can use past tier 6, basically. Because that was tier 4. This is tier 6, basically, he can use. And as you can see, his proficiencies are long. He's really good. Like, really good. He can use simple weapons and shields. He can use ranged weapons, but he's not proficient with them. Unlike other classes, he's not proficient in ranged weapons, even though it's his proficiencies there as ranged light, meaning he can use ranged weapons, just not proficient with all of them. He's also smart and experienced because he's got intelligence and wisdom characteristic mains. Now, the Paladin is one of the first few that mixes 3 mains of the original 8, which is Brawn, Constitution, Agility, Dexterity, Charisma, Intelligence, Willpower, and Wisdom. Of the 8, only 3 are used by the Paladin, but that's still better than any of the other classes previously. Not only that, he gets tier 5 magic, he uses simple martial and shields, but he doesn't have many proficiencies, meaning that he is built entirely on using his faith and using his melee. Now, the Shield Bearer is a tank. That was obvious from the skills you probably saw. He is a tank who's basically magic, but as well, he's also like the Paladin, a Brawn, Constitution, and Wisdom person, whereas the Paladin was Brawn, Constitution, and Willpower. He used the Willpower for faith, whereas the Shield Bearer uses Wisdom for his magic. You can see he's also got more proficiencies, and he can only use shields and simple weapons. This is because the Paladin can use martial weapons like swords, glaives, and other such things, but the Shield Bearer cannot do that. He can only really use shields as his main proficiency. This is a video on basically what my classes are. So, as you've seen now, I've got 5 separate classes. I've had them tested. They're quite broken, and I've made edits to them, but I will still be changing some of them. So I hope you enjoyed this video on classes. Hope you enjoyed it on the fact that now you know what to enjoy whenever you play this game and how broken things can get. I hope to see you in the next one.